Fire away.
Coach, I clip just kind of what he learned about last year. You know, your first year as pitching coach and everything y'all went through. How much can you take or from last year as well from your perspective?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think at the end of every year as a coach, you kind of have to take stock on where you're at and what you did well and what you didn't do well and what you can improve at. And I think that there's a lot of lessons going into this off season that we look to improve on coming into the fall. And I also think that it shows you there's not one way to be successful on the mound. I mean, everyone looks at it last year when we were kind of pitching by committee, and it's like, oh, well, they don't have starters, they don't have this or that. But obviously it was effective for us at times, and it's different. So I think whenever it's not the traditional thing that people look at it as, well, they're not good in this manner. I thought our kids were warriors last year, kind of accepting that role and the way that we went about it. And so, it shows that you can get it done in a lot of different ways. And last year was definitely a prime instance of that.
I guess you want to have more of an established rotation this year, but is it comforting to know if y'all do have to go back to something like that, even if it's not for every start, but just for like a Sunday start, that y'all have guys on staff who have been through that type of, scenario before?
Yeah, I think that having experience pitching like that is certainly positive for the instance where maybe a start doesn't go the way that you want it to. Of course, we want to get back to a traditional manner. I think last year is going to help us to do so. Having guys that really didn't have as much experience going into the spring, having to get thrown into some unique roles is going to help us moving forward into this year. And you look at the staff coming back this year, I think there's, obviously going into last year wasn't as much experience as there is now. But yeah, I think that obviously with the numbers we have and the quality of arms that we have, I think that if we do get in that situation, that we could still obviously be successful.
Is it important to your pitchers to know that role? Like, I'm going to be starter on Saturday.
Yeah, of course, definitely is. I think that takes kind of takes the stress off of them having to guess when they're going to go into games and different things like that. I think having a routine based around when they're going to pitch is certainly really important, and that's where I say last year, I think our guys did as good of a job in that situation as you could possibly do, just accepting the difference in how we did things. And so, but yes, to answer your question, having a routine from week to week is extremely important. And even as a reliever, kind of understanding, all right, I may be hot this day versus the days I'm not going to be hot, and what I'm doing in the weight room and what I'm doing in my throwing and all those different things. So, having those routines based around what they're doing is very important, I think, for their minds, just to be ready to pitch on those given days.
Watching Carter last year in that, especially the regional championship, he just looked like a different guy on the mound, like intense, focused. Like, when did you see that maturation from maybe early in his career to flipping that switch?
I think it had everything to do with confidence, going out there and doing it. Coach touched on it a little bit. It has not always been easy for Carter Spivey, and even going back into the fall of last year, it was not easy for Carter Spivey. It took him getting out there, having some success, us giving him the ball in situations where it mattered and the game was on the line, and him going out and doing it. And then, I noticed kind of when we get into that 20-game win streak, the way that he was carrying himself out there, he looked like a frontline guy for us. Even though he's pitching in the middle of the game, you had a ton of confidence that he was going to get it done. And you could just see, if you're watching it on TV or you're watching it from the side, the determination that he carried himself with and the confidence. When we gave him the ball, I had full expectation that we were gonna either finish the game or give ourselves a chance to win that game. So that's kind of when the switch flipped for him, I think, kind of in the middle of the season, and it was a noticeable difference from the beginning of the year or the early spring or even the fall, for sure.
With this program being so successful, you guys end up playing, upwards of 65-ish games a year. So how do you kind of manage some pitchers' arms when they, maybe pitch twice as many innings or something like that, just from what they did in high school?
Yeah, it's definitely, there is a whole process that goes with that, from our trainer, Zach Womack, who's an unbelievable trainer, does an unbelievable job with our guys, and then our strength and conditioning coach, Dennis Wilson, and of course myself. But everybody from the beginning of the fall to even now, they're trained a certain way. So certain starters are on a 7-day rotation, and so they know what each day looks like leading up into their start day. And then as we get into the fall, we also kind of split guys off that we feel like are probably going to be relievers for us. And we start training them for those specific situations, because from your point, relievers in high school, there's not really such thing. The guys that we're recruiting pretty much all come in as starters. And so for them to be able to take the ball multiple times a week, you have to train them and get them ready for that, or else we're neglecting what is actually going to happen in the spring. And so we start working on that process in the fall, and everybody has a detailed throwing plan each day. All their arm care stuff, all their weight room stuff is all mapped out for them throughout the course of the week. And then just the throwing of each day. We have heavier days, which would be more of a bullpen or our competitive days. Then we have recovery days where there's very, very light toss going on. And then, there's 2 days a week where it's, kind of up to them from a choice depending on how they're feeling. But you're training them to be ready for the spring. If we just kept them all in a starter routine throughout the whole fall and the whole spring, then we're probably neglecting what the reality of the spring is going to look like.
Coach, do you have any other, like Zach last year was a position player who pitched quite a bit. Anybody else in that boat that you're pitching a bit whose their primary role is going to be elsewhere?
Fortunately, at this point, no. Hopefully it stays that way, because that was an interesting juggling act for Zach, because playing a premier position like shortstop, there's a lot of throwing that taxes the arm, and so he did an incredible job of managing that. It's not like he's out in right field or left field and only having to throw a couple of high intensity balls per day. Zach was very detailed, and every single day when his catch play with Coach Palumbo at the end of it, he was working on something pitching wise. Maybe it's in a flat ground perspective or something. And so that really, when we have those guys, it just depends on what we expect the role to be from a higher volume standpoint. But Zach obviously had a high volume on both sides. So what he did last year was, honestly, it was amazing.
With Saylor also having that experience of being like, you can close out games, you can pitch in the middle, you can start. How much of a comfort does that give you? Just, you can kind of throw him in any role. He's done that.
It's the beautiful Swiss Army knife there. You can kind of do what you want to do with them. And hopefully we don't have to throw them, 39 times or whatever we threw them last year. But the beautiful thing about him is he is willing to do anything, and he's a guy that wants to be in the moment. He wants the ball in whatever situation you want to give it to him. And I think you saw it last year where he started out as a starter and it didn't go his way. And then, he's a middle reliever, he's a closer, he's a early guy, he's all those things. And having those type of guys in your pitching staff, it's really so valuable, and you can't put a price tag on it, because when you give him the ball that it's going to be a quality inning or a quality outing, whatever it may be. So the value that Garrett Saylor brings forth with our pitching staff is just tremendous.
Do you personally feel any different right now than you did, say, this time last year? Just going through it, being the voice in the pitcher, how much do you feel like you've maybe changed?
Well, I hope I feel a little bit different every year. As you continue to get experience and continue to learn from things that went well, or maybe the mistakes that you made. I hope that I don't ever get to the point to where I just feel the same every single year. But yeah, absolutely. I think last year with what we were able to do certainly gave everybody involved some confidence moving forward. And then this year, kind of having that blueprint of, like I said, when you take stock, you want to move forward. I think that this fall, of course, we're trying to build more well-rounded pitchers, guys that can go multiple times to the lineup and things like that, but just trying to make everybody a little bit more dynamic, whether that's with their repertoire, whether that's with their mindset, whatever it may be. But yeah, I hope that even, the pitchers from last year, the freshmen, the young guys, I hope that they feel a lot different, moving forward into the spring and have a lot more confidence in themselves, for sure.
I feel like pitching is always just evolving, just how the game works. So what's your off-season maybe knowledge sourcing like? How do you kind of approach that? Are you trying to find different ideas, or how do you?
Always.
Yeah.
As far as that goes, we have a lot of people that we trust and you talk to in the game of baseball, but there's more resources out there than there ever is as well. And so you kind of have to find what fits with your program and the structure that you're putting forth with the program. But I listen to a podcast on pitching or anything pretty much every single day, where you're trying to get new ideas, you're trying to learn something new that may affect one pitcher on your staff. It could be one pitcher that it makes a huge difference for. And so, yes, the knowledge base and the resources, they have to be used in this game, or else you're going to get left behind. Whether you're a player, you're a coach, it doesn't really matter. And so you got to take advantage of the resources. And yeah, this game is just like anything in life, really. You're always learning something, or you're just kind of getting stagnant. So.
Any guys you've seen kind of make a big jump from last year to this year in the pitching home, pitches out?
Yeah, I think it's easy to look at the guys that you saw a lot last year from, Spivey and Groves and Savage and Jake Hunter, but I think Coach hit on a little bit, but that sophomore group has, they've been impressive, kind of improving, especially since they've been back in the spring. You look at guys like even Jaden Winter, a guy who you didn't see much last year, his ability to pitch, his ability to execute, to have quality secondary stuff from a year ago where it was a lot of fastballs. Kind of the same with Jake, where Jake is now, as you saw in the Purple Bowl World Series, Jake is now a 4-pitch pitcher and is not throwing 85% fastballs or whatever it may be. Carter Spivey, obviously last year was a guy that was throwing a lot of cutters, and now he's 4-pitch mix guy. And you have to be careful with that because you don't want to get away from their strengths, right? When the game is on the line, you want to obviously run with the pitcher's strengths. But as I said, you're looking to make guys more dynamic. But guys from Eric Ritchie is a left-hander that didn't pitch for us last year, has improved greatly. Obviously Merritt Beaker, Jaden Winter, Jordan Little is a guy with a really, really good arm and a really high ceiling. And so excited to see him get out there and compete a little bit. Trey has gone from being a 2-pitch guy, and the year transformation from him in the early spring last year, from his bullpens into his first outings to where he's at now, and the maturization of him, it's really impressive, and so he's improved greatly. So I'm definitely excited to see a lot of those guys get out there this spring, especially early spring when we start competing, and really get a good gauge of where they're at.
With Trey, obviously, we saw him pitch at the back end or kind of clean up innings last year. What are those conversations like? Hey, we want to make this guy that throws 95 a starter and kind of do some of those things versus use him maybe in those spots where he can clean up stuff. Is that kind of the balance there, trying to figure out his role?
100%. It's definitely something that we're talking about daily, and that I'm talking about with Trey. The thing about Trey is I think the hold off on wanting to make him a starter is just what he was able to do at times last year when he'd come into these huge situations, whether it's bases loaded and go punch out, pop up, and him understanding that, hey, like, people, you don't do that. That's not a normal thing, Trey. And so I think it's going to depend a lot on where we feel like we're at come the spring scrimmages and different things like that. But I'm very comfortable with putting him into either role, with where he's at right now, whether it's as a starter, whether it's as a reliever and a guy's pitching multiple times a week. I think, it could go either way at this point, and we'll see. But I think using a blueprint from last year when we had guys with experience in the middle and the back end of the game, there's a ton of value to that.
I mean, him as an example too. I mean, he pitched out of the stretch a lot, right? I mean, just even that's another dynamic to move into a starter's role, right?
Yeah, I mean, he can pitch out of the stretch in the with nobody on base and things like that. But he's pitching out of the windup now as well. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely something to think about. And again, he didn't pitch a ton this fall just because I felt like we rode him pretty hard in the spring, and he went out and pitched this summer to develop as a starter, and so he had a few outings. And so this early spring is important to kind of see where he's at as far as if he is going to be a starting option for us or if we feel more comfortable with keeping him in the bullpen.
We've seen the way pitches are called evolved over the years with the now wristband. Does that pretty much take away any sign stealing and things like that? How comfortable?
Yeah, well now it's funny. Technology is interesting, but now we have watches where basically I have a calculator in my hand. I just type in the number and it goes straight to all the watches to all the players on the field. And so, yeah, it's taken away all of the sign stealing. Now, of course, we still have to do a good job of pitchers concealing pitches, and the catcher's doing a good job of not giving location and different things like that. But man, for practice, it's simplified things a lot because we don't have to work through night signs. We don't have to work through all the different sign sets. It just, have the calculator and it goes into their watch, and boom, let's roll from there. So it's made pitching coaches' jobs a lot easier.
How long have you had that system?
We just got it this fall. Now of course, last year we did a mix of the catcher giving the signs without anybody on base or at second base. And then we had the sign card, which I know you guys all love the sign card and us giving the signs and all that stuff. I know that fires y'all up, but we had that with the guy at second base last year, and so now we've moved forward with these watches because there were some teams such as Virginia and Vanderbilt and guys that that we talked to about it, and they said that if you don't do it, you're crazy. So we've moved forward with that.
Coach, I'm curious with you as a former catcher, what's kind of your relationship like with Crystal, Cox, and those guys in addition to handling pitchers? Like, do you try to, I don't know, help that connection as well, the pitcher-catcher connection?
Always, yeah, it's extremely important. I think that's where you saw Ben Newton last year was a huge piece to us having success because he challenged our guys in the right way and he understood that he needed to be at times a psychologist, at times a guy that, you know, pushes their buttons and different things like that. And so you're always working on that with the catchers because you can give them that unique perspective and help them understand. And so those guys, they probably get a little tired of me challenging them in the bullpen because I'm always Ryan McChrystal, Justin, Nick DeLisi, those guys, I'm always challenging them to be game-like in the pen and develop those relationships. And to their credit, they ask a lot of questions as well, you know, especially Ryan, a guy moving into his sophomore year. He asks a lot of questions about pitch sequencing, about handling guys, about different things like that. So it's I think it would be crazy for me not to help those guys in those situations just because I've been back there before.
Do you have a closer, or is that kind of develop through as you go?
I hope we have a lot of them. You know, I hope we have a lot of them. No, we will not have a set closer. I think, you know, in this day and age in college baseball, you hope you have a couple of guys that can go finish a game for you. And the way that we've always done our pitching and our relievers is, man, when the opportunity comes up, you don't know when you're going to win or lose a baseball game. It can be in the 4th inning where you give up a 3 or 4 spot. It can be in the 6th inning. It can be in the 9th inning, you know. And yes, those outs are tough to get at the end. And sometimes it's, you know, you saw with Saylor and Spivey and guys like that where they come in the 7th inning and they finish a game, you know. And you hope to have an opportunity where it's not just one set guy who goes and pitches the 9th inning every single time because, I mean, if that's the guy you're choosing, then he's probably pretty good, and he may be needed in the 6th inning, you know. And so it's more about who's right for the situation, who's right for the matchup, and of course, you know, we're going to bring our most quality arm out of the bullpen for those situations.
One more question? All right.
Good.
Thanks.
Thank
Thank you.